Hey everyone, I'm Charting Man Dan with the Chart Guys. I've been trading cannabis stocks since 2010. We've got the summer slow bleed in full effect, so our content and coverage is slowing down in the sector, but we'll still check in every now and again and see where we stand on the charts and bigger picture. As we know, most everybody is looking towards the end of the summer and the election season for the next potential catalysts. So we're going to look at the bigger picture here, both sides of the border, higher listed names, OTC names, and I'm going to give an example of my approach to trading this sector at the moment. But if anything, we have the big drop in full effect. We're down the last 5 weeks, 30 to 40% in the sector. And if anything, I hope that this content, and I know it does, I get messages from people that see the light and say, oh yeah, this is useful. Technical analysis does have use. If you're focused only on fundamentals, you would think there was a 2% chance that we would drop 35% in the month following the most bullish news that this sector has had in years. If you looked at the technicals, there were red flags that allowed for us to sell some into euphoria and protect against a potential pullback. And so I don't have any better track record of publicly posted information than I do with the cannabis sector over the last 7 years. And if anything, I just hope it brings some more people to the light of saying, okay, maybe there is something to technical analysis as far as utilizing it as just one of our tools in our tool belts to try and make money in these markets. So MSOS is currently breaking the monthly uptrend. We have lost the monthly higher lows. That is a big step back, just in the sense that it took a long time to get that monthly uptrend. It took about 6 months, 5 months of price action for it to develop. Now we are at the lowest level that we've seen in all of the year, 2024, which means we now don't have any green in MSOS in 2024. And, again, if the broader market was flat on the year, it would be much easier to stomach. But the fact that everything else is ripping, and this now, with this news catalyst that everybody was waiting for, is flat on the year, it's as frustrating as it can possibly get. And we're now looking at the next level, down at 599 as far as support. I'm looking for a bounce in the short term, and then we'll be looking for a weekly lower high. So if we want to talk bigger picture, there's no sign of a bounce right now, but if we get it, we scout that weekly lower high, and we'll take it from there. We just know the most likely scenario the next time we see a bounce is going to be that weekly lower high. So we just keep that in the back of our mind and then approach it one day at a time still. On the daily time frame, we just traded sideways. $8 is very clearly the new resistance level. We just really struggled at that level. Look how many times we rejected between 793 and 812. It was literally 2 weeks in a row of just sideways rejections. And again, that's your supply and demand doing this, evening out, fair value, and then bearish. And you could say, well, maybe the banking being removed from whatever bill they were trying to stuff it into. Again, I'm not paying any attention to safe banking because it's the biggest tease this sector has ever known. And it got removed from whatever, and we get another leg down. And so that's the scales between supply and demand being balanced, and then supply winning that battle and seeing another fresh, clear leg down. We're back to daily oversold conditions. This is the first time we've seen daily oversold since we bottomed on the big dump after the initial run up on the HHS announcement. So that has me a little bit interested, and I just made really the first significant trades in this sector since selling on this headline pop. And just to give some backdrop of how that was shaping up. So starts out on Thursday, getting ready for the trade setup. If MSOS breaks $7 into daily oversold, I will begin scaling back some of the positions for a weekly bounce. So the positions that I sold, looking to get back in. All right, now we got Friday rolling around. If that happens, we break $7, I'm interested. 10.03. I am nibbling back 25% of what was sold a month ago. I was in TCNNF and MSOS mostly. I'm going to choose TCNNF and GTBIF on this go. That ended up being the low of the day to the minute. Now, I'm very confident in my short-term technical analysis. So why did I make an entry here? Now, am I confident that I'm going to make a good entry that's going to play out over the next 3 weeks? No, I do not have high confidence there. I have high confidence that we are at some extremes. We break the psychological $7 level. The 4-hour RSI is crushed. The hourly RSI is crushed. The RSI was crushed on most time frames. We call that a super stack when it aligns like that. So I know there is a high probability we see a short-term bounce. And as a day trader, I definitely, well, day trader transitioning to a swing trader, but I definitely have higher conviction in my shorter term analysis. And so I was confident that a short-term bounce was coming that allows me to position. So let's now, what do I do with that? So I buy in at that point in time around 10 a.m. That ends up being the low of the day. We end up getting a bounce of 6%. That's a pretty solid bounce, and it allows for positioning. So as that bounce is playing out, we remind ourselves, we're just looking for an hourly oversold bounce and an hourly lower high. So we remind ourselves, any protected bounce traders from today are selling partial, ideally with a break even under the low of today. Hourly trend change Monday would be needed for any bounce follow through. Into the end of the day, we pulled back more than bulls want to see. You want to see 50% retracement or less to confirm an uptrend. We gave back almost all of that bounce. It's still possible the bulls salvage things and get a bounce going, but it's less likely now. When we're at the high of the day, all right, this might be a bounce that follows through for a couple of days. And then by the end of the day, not so sure anymore. So we sell into that move knowing the most likely scenario, because we're in an hourly downtrend, is that hourly lower high. What time was that at? 127. We had already hit the top at that point. But, there's 127 right up near the high of that bounce. And so, just an example using TCNNF, didn't nail the bottom, didn't nail the top, but was able to position to be in full control of the trade. So as an example, I buy at 866, I sell half at 892. So I was in, I think before the second flush down. So I was in here, I sell some here, and now my break even is 840. So I can do two things. I can exit if 840 is hit and say, nope, that is not what I was looking for, because what I was looking for was an hourly uptrend to get a bit of a bounce going. And be break even, back to cash, and then I wait for the next setup where I have short-term conviction, high conviction, that I know the most likely scenario. Or I can give a little wiggle room. Maybe I put my stop under, 820 and I risk a couple percent, saying, man, it's 25% position, 2% on 25% position, no big deal whatsoever. Give the bulls a little bit of wiggle room. Haven't fully decided what I'm going to do here, but I ended with a green position. Again, it doesn't look good giving it all back, and I assume I'm going to stop out, but we'll have to see how it plays out into next week. But again, that is my mindset. If I have a short-term setup that I can take advantage of, I position by selling partial into any strength, and then I try and let the rest play out. And I do that on all kinds of time frames. I do it, I did it on Microsoft at the 2022 bear market near the lows. I sell a little bit, I stick my stop under that low, and I'm still in that position at this point because I just let it play out and I never stopped out. And so in an ideal world, this position, I was hoping for a weekly bounce to eventually get going. Maybe it does, but again, it doesn't look likely at this point. So I positioned myself in a low risk, high reward scenario, and I may stop out. That's the way it goes. It's what we do as a trader. So MSOS, and now let's get into analysis. That was just a trade example. So MSOS, anything under 787 is just a daily lower high. The next support, aside from, we got 704, 7 psychological. We broke 7, so looking down at 659 as a little level. There's a decent amount of price action here. If you watch Chart Guys Lamont, he does a lot of volume profile analysis, and he does cover MSOS in his Sunday videos, so check that out. But we could say there's a good chunk. Look at all this price action here, resistance here, price action here, and now we're entering back into this band. And so, if we're going to see an opportunity for the bulls into the fall, and again, the names I'm focusing on True Leaf for the potential Florida catalyst, and Green Thumb because it's the clear strongest individual name in the sector, best individual name in the sector. So if that's going to play out as a thesis, another bull opportunity, end of the summer, into the fall, I want to see this range hold and act as support essentially. And we have ideally, we've got these two bands now. All this resistance with these rejections. Again, look at the price action on the way down. Lots of shares traded back there. Lots of rejections up here. So In an ideal world, at this point, now that we're at the support, bulls are hoping that we just chop around within this range for the rest of the summer. But we have not seen any sign of the bulls whatsoever. Since that sell the headline day, there hasn't been anything resembling a strong bullish day. And that's an entire month. That's a long time. That is full bear control. Just got to call it like it is. So GTBIF. Again, I'm watching for a bigger picture if the thesis of end of summer into the voting season plays out. Again, what I want, best case scenario, aside from, Schedule 3 being official and all that, I want Trump to try and take the cannabis. He's taken crypto from Biden. I want to see him try and take cannabis as an issue from Biden as well, because that means it'll get a lot more attention. Now, I'm not sure that's going to happen, because I almost feel like the Trump team is saying, give him cannabis, we'll take crypto. And it's almost like a trade-off because they're fairly similar demographics, I would think. So watching for the long-term inverse monthly head and shoulders, establish a new base of support, and in an ideal world, break to higher highs into the end of the year. And green thumb, GTBIF divided by MSOS to show us relative strength or weakness is the strongest, testing right now, the strongest that it's ever been compared to MSOS. And if you look at this long-term chart, it's been nothing but seeing relative strength. Again, you can definitely point to the fundamentals as to why that's happening, but you can also see it on this chart as far as, this chart tells me that fundamentally, out of the major MSOs, this is the winner. This is what the market is determining is the winner at this point. So that's a good sign, but obviously if MSOS keeps bleeding, it just means we can be dropping slower. So GTBIF haven't hit fresh lows yet. You can see it very clearly, the relative strength. Right now, if we were doing what MSOS is doing, we would have traded sideways here, and right now we'd be trading down below $10 with another clear leg down. Instead, we're trying to hold a support. This is part of the reason I choose GTBIF, because of that relative strength. If we hold 1066 here, we hold some support and try and shift momentum. The only way we're going to clearly shift momentum is holding 1066 and breaking 1245. If we just chop around within this range, nothing's going to be changing, but at least there's a support level. We're going to look at some of these tier 2 names and other names that don't really have a nearby support to be going off of. So, and also a much stronger close. Again, look at that lower wick. Some bulls did buy a bit. TCNNF closed right here. GTBIF did close a few percent off that low. And again, it's a nice bounce, 11 to 11.7. That's a 6% bounce. And so again, it can allow you to position, even if you don't nail the top and the bottom. If the size of the pie is 6%, and as a trader I get 3%, that's perfectly fine. Or maybe I sell for a 3% move, I sell half, and now my break even is 3% lower than when I entered. Again, that's my mindset and trading strategy of how I approach things very often. TCNNF closing at the low of the day. It still has it. We're right at this support here as well. Technically, we did break 860, but again, new resistance, just that daily lower high. 985 is resistance. If we're under that level, it's nothing but a daily downtrend, lower high, lower low, weak bounce, bear flag, lower low, lower high. I was hoping an inverse head and shoulders could try and shape up, but it didn't. And next zone of support here, 803. And again, just looking back at where there's a lot of volume traded here, 780 to 803, decent amount of volume in this range. Looking back, it acted as support, then acted as resistance, support. So keeping an eye on that zone. And again, the reason I'm only short nibbling 25% reload here is because I'm only confident in the short term, not the longer term. We can easily keep dropping for another month. The broader market is extremely strong. Granted, IWM, our risk on gauge of the market, has not been strong. It's just a weekly equilibrium tightening up. We know it's semiconductors and big tech just running away from things. But again, if we see any kind of meaningful weakness in the market, this sector will continue to feel downward pressure. Best case for outside help, we know the sector needs headlines, the sector needs volume. There's no volume. But for outside help, if we don't have those things, you definitely want IWM to break bull here and see rotation from semiconductors like NVDA into IWM and small caps. Curaleaf, I'm not really interested in it. I keep an eye on it, but 379 is support on the weekly. Again, just dropping for a month straight. Daily downtrend, very clear. Slow bleed. It's just that slow bleed. The slow bleed picked up momentum a bit the last 2 days, absolutely, but it's just all bear, looking down at 379 support. Tier 2 names are weaker. We know they are stronger. They go up a bigger percentage in euphoria. They drop a bigger percentage in fear. And so the red flag on AYRWF, we were talking about this real long-term equilibrium that just kept tightening up. The first bear break was down at 225. The second red flag was 210. And here we are 15% under that level, 14%. 165, 157, next supports to be looking at. But again, same kind of slow bleed here. Just literally no strength whatsoever since the headline day a month ago. And the other names are even worse. VRNOF, just free fall. That's a 50% drop. No, it's not. It's a 40 to 45% drop since that headline. But again, this equilibrium breaking bear is your big red flag. The big red flag here was 448. And here we are now down 30% from that level. I'm doing very rough math. 25 to 30% from that level. So again, you know, if I'm a long-term holder and I believe in this company, but I'm half fundamental and half technicals, I sell half my position when that support breaks. I'll reload it at a cheaper spot. And when you get confident in your technical analysis, if you've done it for a few years and thousands of charts, it's a lot easier to click that button. But here we are looking down at $3, and that is the lowest level in 8 months. And then you got TSNDF, even worse. TSNDF is testing 129, which is the lowest level that we've seen in a year and a half. It's just not a bullish chart. It's just a very weak bounce. It's a bear flag. Look at the 3-month time frame. The drop, the incredibly weak bounce compared to the drop, and heading back down towards the lows. So I have zero interest. You know, in my opinion, the best bet for the tier 2 names is playing them when you've got uptrends and euphoria momentum, but you know, being very selling into strength. Again, I know it's easier said than done. HITI is the only name I'm looking at in the sector that has a weekly uptrend. It's holding weekly EMA 12. It is a lack of liquidity. We dropped real hard Friday on the earnings reaction on just a little bit of volume. Obviously, a very significant bounce as well. Another rising wedge here. MSOS on the weekly was a rising wedge that we were pointing out for 6 weeks before it confirmed. Wasn't sure it was going to happen, but definitely was watching for it. Similar kind of rising wedge pattern, but I care most about the weekly. Simple statement, if we keep closing above weekly EMA 12, we're going to stay in an uptrend. And so it is on the NASDAQ. That's definitely one differentiating factor, but it doesn't have enough volume for me. Average volume right now is $1.5 million traded a day. I need like 3 times that before I start paying attention. But it's the one little bright spot in a very ugly sector. GRWG, so the other higher listed names, we were watching this tightening range. It broke bear, higher low, lower high, higher low, quick lower high, bear break. So now we're looking down at the next support, 207, and just a fake out. Weekly higher low set. All right, let's go and give it right back. So other names, SNDL, we're just in slow bleed mode all over. Doesn't matter if you're higher listed or not. It is a slow bleed. 175 support on SNDL coming into play. These names are also weekly head and shoulders charts. So again, as I said, the weekly lower high is the most likely result of the next bounce. You better believe bears are going to be waiting for it because we're going to look at these Canadian names that have head and shoulders as well. But, you know, SNDL can bounce 30% and form a right shoulder. So we're definitely watching for weekly lower highs, and we're going to gauge what is the bounce retracement size of how much we pulled back to help us determine most likely scenarios, but a weekly lower high will certainly be the most likely scenario. CGC, same deal. We're watching support of 609, but anything under where we came from, again, we can go 30% and set a weekly lower high. Bears will be waiting for it for a reload. In the short term, bulls must hold 677 and break 785 to confirm a daily uptrend if we're going to get that weekly bounce going. So like GTBIF, it does have a little recent support that has not broken yet. TLRY, again, slow bleed. TLRY since earnings 2 months ago literally only has 2 bullish days. 2 bullish days in 2 months. The rest is just slow bleed. And I've been, dogging TLRY and talking bearish about it since those headlines because it was or since the earnings reaction because of how big a red flag it was. And so we do have, it's if your castle is being stormed and we're doing war analogies, this is your last holdout and your last, I guess I shouldn't say last because we got 150, but you got to hold 160 to 165 after it held November of last year, and then it held in March of this year, and then it held in April of this year, and here we are testing it again. Psychedelic names, still watching MNMD for a potential daily falling wedge to shape up a monthly higher low. And we got to keep in mind, we went 500%, and a monthly higher low is the most likely scenario. And so I'm watching very patiently. I have not traded this name in months. Very patiently watching for a re-entry after selling into that momentum. Percentage-wise, that's probably, it wasn't a large position, but percentage-wise, it's probably my best trade of the year. But going to be interested in potentially reloading for a monthly higher low, watching this setup. I don't love anything right now, but if we head back down towards $7, I might get interested. But the sector, cannabis has some company in misery, whatever that statement is, phrase, misery company. Anyways, misery loves company. This is a 50% pullback from where we just came from over the span of months in a slow bleed fashion. And again, watching for a monthly higher low to try and form, but there is no sign of it. And we've retraced well over 60% plus of where we came from. ATAI, slow bleed, CYBN. So what does this tell us? It tells us that low cap names in sectors that have legal ambiguity, federally speaking, are not being bought in this market environment as everybody's focusing on semiconductors. Again, look at the gains that legitimate, high, huge revenue companies are giving. And that's why people aren't seeking these names, because if you can get 50% in a $1 trillion company in the span of what? Months, 2 months, 70%, 73% in one of the largest companies in the world that everybody loves at the moment, or penny stocks that are federally illegal. I mean, that's what's going on. You just got to call it like it is. That is why the market is not caring about this sector right now, these sectors. All right. Do good things, remain protective, establish your game plan in advance. I'll always keep an eye on the sector forever. But again, my attention goes elsewhere. Right now, there are 5 times as many people interested in GME videos than cannabis videos. And I'm trading actively GME, so that's where my content creation attention goes. See you next time. Have a great weekend.